if you have intentionality with no skill to express the intention, then what are we doing? Now you have to resort to a lesser way of creating, and, we get shitty art. We get excuses. People saying, well, oh, this art was about this, this, and that, and the art is some bullshit. But they can hide behind it because society and the culture that we've set as creatives and as gatekeepers of the space, now he can hide behind the fact that I really can't paint. I don't really have the skill set that I need to be able to express the ideas that I would like to express with a spirit of excellence. So I just do it, the best I can, and people will buy it because they're shallow, and it's about a market and an investment.
And if you're a good storyteller,
you can really capitalize on being a good storyteller and not having any creative talent, not having any creative skill, just being a good storyteller.
These kind of relationships that get disturbed when we don't take the time to know what it is to sing, to know how to get close to the mic again. But it's singing doesn't make it happen, or maybe.
welcome to another episode of TuneTheFork. I have with me multidisciplinary artist, Grambling graduate, SAIC graduate, beautiful human being, awesome brother from what I've seen so far, Blake Pierre. How you doing, man?
Oh, great, excited to be here.
Good. I'm glad you're here, man. As you know, when we first met a month and a half ago or so, I was sitting there and listening to you talk about your work, man, and see how connected you are to, yourself and how that shows up through your art. And I was like, I need to have a deeper conversation with this brother. So I'm adding the fact that you connected to your work, that you're black, that you're young, that you a man. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I need to have a conversation, man. Yeah. How you feeling?
Feeling great. Good to be here. Feeling blessed.
Yeah.
Feeling excited about the future. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'm feeling good, man.
We've had some real cool conversations, behind the camera before we started recording, man. And I'm excited about getting people to know more about you and your process and your journey. But I wanted to start with what triggered me in your work. And that's your storytelling, man, what your relationship is to what you're communicating, what you're creating, why you're creating it in that way. And it really just centers around you wanting to express yourself and various emotions and subconsciousness and spirituality through not just your art, but what elements, what materials you use to make it. So talk to me a little bit about your journey to get to the point to where you've synthesized all of this now, and this is how you want to speak moving forward.
Yeah, it was definitely a long journey. Like you said, I went to Grambling State, and when I was at Grambling State, I actually started painting my sophomore year. My major was psychology.
Okay.
And so that's definitely what I was interested in, but I didn't understand how deep my talent went with art. I just started creating art my senior year of high school is when I had my first art class. And so I created a little bit there. When I got to Grambling, I was still creating, but it wasn't serious. And I remember making two pieces. It was a piece of Jimi Hendrix, and it was an abstract portrait piece that I did in my dorm room. And I was like, man, I'm pretty good at this. I want to see how far I can take this. So I remember changing my major, and it was a big deal because I knew nothing about how to make a future in art. Okay. All I knew was I had this talent, and I think I can sustain myself financially with this talent and really go on to do some big things. So I did change my major, and ultimately I went to SAIC for a post-grad program, stayed there a year. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot as far as conceptual art. I was exposed to the museums there. I was in the museum faithfully. SAIC Museum is across the street from the school, and I was able to look at a lot of the greats and see how they were creating and just see how people would respond to the pieces. And so that ultimately shaped the way that I wanted people to engage with my work. And it got me thinking about the intent behind my work a lot more. So I would say after that, you know, I got into a couple of schools, but I wasn't happy with the financial packet as far as how much money I was receiving. And so I did not choose to go to SAIC. I got into a couple more schools, but not as much scholarship money as I would like to have seen.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I'm creating all this work to get into these institutions, to get into certain galleries, to get certain showings. And when I thought about all that, it's like, yo, you're not making the work, though, that God intended for you to make. You're not making the work that's true to you, that's, you know, expressing who you are and what you came to do and how you came to change the game. You focusing on getting into an institution. And so once I finally realized that, I changed that and I started to make work that was reflective of me and reflective of my spiritual path and my walk with God and how I move. Then things started opening up in terms of how I was able to create, how ideas were flowing, and just the way that I perceive things now. So
now, remember when I was, you know, reading up on you, you drew cartoons when you were younger.
yeah,
And then you kind of, you know, you come from a sports background. Your pops, I believe, played football.
yeah.
Okay, and then you played. Was your natural disposition as a kid to create, and then you went to the
So I did a
sports
little bit
piece?
of everything as a kid. I was a huge Dragon Ball Z fan.
Okay.
So anime, you know, that was a big influence. Ultimately, I didn't really have a love for drawing. It was just I wanted to recreate that cartoon on paper. I saw somebody do it in class, and I'm like, yo, how did you do that? And he was like, I could teach you. And so that's really where my drawing journey began.
Okay.
I started doing that. Little did I know it was going to take me to the point I am now. But it started very innocent like that, just wanting to recreate what I saw that I was inspired by. And over the time, I picked it back up, you know, maybe a year later, then maybe 2 years I'll go without doing it and I'll pick it up again just to see where I am. And so it kind of went like that for me. But to answer your question, I was extremely creative. I love drawing, but it's like we were talking about earlier with outlets in Black communities. It's like that wasn't an outlet for the environment that I was in. Like there was no drawing club. There was no, you know what I'm saying, art show at school. So the avenue I didn't even know existed. All I knew was Van Gogh, the guy that cut his ear off, you know, and, you know, he crazy. And I didn't see a future in that for myself. So once I got older and I went to SAIC and I got that experience, that's when I really truly understood, like, okay, you could really make money from this. I'm meeting people who are making money in this now. I'm seeing the different career paths that you can choose to make a life for yourself doing this thing and to be able to influence people positively and express yourself creatively. So it took a long time to be able to see other people who were successful and who looked like me, who were doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so once I found out about the Kerry James Marshalls, the Kahindes, you know, the Alma Thomases, the people like that, Hank Willis Thomas, all those people, then I started to realize, like, okay, I could do this.
Now, what I felt was unique about your story is the integration of the shadow work into your work.
Right.
And I feel like I'm an old guy sometimes. And when I watch younger people, I should say, move down a path, I'm always excited to see that and to understand how they got to that point at a younger age. Obviously, times are different than, you know, the 80s and all of that old kind of shit, and 90s. But you seem like a really well-connected dude to your internals, to your spirituality, and you got an idea on, you know, what you need to work with. You got a close relationship with yourself. That's probably the best way to say it. What was the process like for you to get to that point? Most people I know who are in that have like gone through a bunch of wild shit, and they're like, you know, I got to figure out what's going on. I'm burning down too many bridges. It's too many ladies that don't talk to me no more. It's something that gets them to that point. And you know, you don't have to go into detail or anything like that, but I'm just curious to know like how you got to that point so early.
I would say hearing from God from a young age and continuing to hear from God throughout my life, even in times where it didn't make sense. It's like I could be at a party, drinking, you know, doing this and that, and then I'm starting to hear from God. Then I'm wondering, well, is this God? Because I'm not doing nothing godly right now. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm nervous. And just things like that continually happening over the course of my life, asking certain questions because I'm confused and frustrated about my life, feeling like I'm not where I need to be. And the convictions in my spirit of where I need to be are so strong that truly this has to be coming from something higher than myself. And so to answer your question, it just comes from a lot of, you know, getting alone by yourself and asking certain questions. And then doing the follow-up to get those questions answered, searching, you know, doing the research, trying to surround yourself with people via the internet who have figured those things out in life. And it's like, okay, well, what can I draw from him to take me further on my journey? And so I think we talked about a little earlier, my study on Carl Jung's work, just a lot of psychology and understanding the mind. That's something that has always been important to me. And I think ultimately that's just my path. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to enlighten people or raise people in consciousness in that way, shedding the light on the fact that we do have to do this internal work, and it is done within the mind. And, you know, looking at effective ways to approach that process. And so I see Carl Jung as an avenue. I see a lot of other things, not a lot of other things, but a few other things that are necessary. But when we talk about shadow work, it's really about going within and looking at the things that are going on internally and seeing, okay, well, how is this affecting me outwardly?
Yeah.
Because as above, so below. As within, so without. So if we understand that, we can understand or get to some answers as to why things are looking the way they are. And then from that point, after observing those things, okay, well, how am I going to approach things differently from here on out? How do I shed a light on that and change that about me that I don't like, and then put something in there that's going to actually produce a different result or bring a different fruit? And so that's really my journey with it, is really just looking at my own life and seeing, man, I want to be the best I could be.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm here to get the most out of myself. I'm noticing that everybody around me does not feel like that. And so I'm realizing I'm really going to have to take this serious, because it's a fight to get to that, because it seems like your environment is trying to pigeonhole you or stop you from getting to that. And when I say your environment, the Bible talks about dealing with principalities in high places. I deal with that. You know, I feel that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's just about recognizing those things, calling them out, and then moving accordingly, and realizing that this journey, it is going to be tough. You know, it's not going to be a cakewalk. Yeah. But you have to commit to figuring those things out, doing the research. We live in the information age.
Yeah, we do.
The information is out there. If you had a spirit of discernment, you could get to a lot of knowledge and growth quick. Yeah. You know, growth that you couldn't usually get to in the, you know, like the 70s or the 60s. Or we didn't have this abundant amount of information. Even when the internet came out, I remember the amount of information that was on the internet when you asked certain questions 10 years ago versus now.
Yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
light years away
Yeah.
from what it used to be.
Yeah.
And it'll continue to grow in that capacity. So it's just about recognizing that and utilizing the tools at your disposition.
When you ask yourself a question and you get an answer you don't like, what do you do with that?
Or an answer that I didn't even know, like this didn't even fit what I thought about the thing. So where is this even coming from? And that's when we talk about like, how did you get into this space? It came from moments like that. Just being somewhere and then you get a thought and it's like, well, yo, I wasn't thinking that. Where did that come from? Now you got to go do some research because that's not, you that kind of threw you off, right? So now you're realizing self-awareness. You have to understand that you are not your thoughts. Okay, so that's one piece of the puzzle. Then something else happens. Then you have to go research that. Then you realize something else. And then you start to connect dots faster. Now we rolling. We getting somewhere faster.
Are you critical of yourself in that process?
Very,
Okay.
very. Sometimes I feel like it's very hard. It's like an impossible task, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
But then I have to realize I'm here.
You shining, brother.
I'm here. I wouldn't be doing it if it was an
Yeah.
impossible task.
Yeah.
God wouldn't have given it to me. So I have to realize that, you know, there are things that you're doing that are hindering the speed of the process. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I get rid of those things so that we can move faster?
And how and who's defining the pace? And is it our pace or is it the divine's pace?
It depends on who you are and how connected you are. If you connected with the divine and you're moving at his pace, and if there are things that, if there are obstacles in the way that are slowing you down, then you have to remove those obstacles. That's a hard thing to do. People don't like removing obstacles. People like staying where they are in their consciousness. You know, people like staying, you know, I'm in this city. I don't want to move here. God telling me move. Or, you know, I'm getting the unction to go here and do this with my business. I don't want to do it. I got a whole family. What you mean? Go back to school at 35 years old with, you know, 2 kids. So it's very hard, especially depending on where you are in life and how connected you are. Some people are not as connected.
Yeah.
So they're just not gonna move. You talking about do this X, Y, and Z. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know what you talking about. So with me though, when I get a message like that, I can't ignore it because I know I want to go and I know I can't get there by myself.
So you're I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. So when you get the message, you've got a strong enough relationship to your intuition and what you're being compelled to do that the time between getting the instruction and doing it is shorter.
Very short time period. And that comes with years of experience though. And so
Years of not listening.
right.
Okay, I want to make sure.
Right.
I
Yeah.
got you.
So, you know, when I say experience, like you have to, for one, you have to even know what the voice is. You have to know where it's coming from to just obey it. I don't even know what it is. First starting, I'm not sure that I know what this is. So now I have to go do some research. Now I've done some research. Now I feel a little bit more comfortable about things. And then from that point on, other things will happen that you may not truly understand or be able to make sense out of. For example, you could have a dream about something that's giving you instruction on what to do or how to handle a certain situation, but that don't mean that you trust the dream.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you know what the dream meant 100%. You could have about 80% comprehension of the dream, but it's like this 20% that you're struggling with. So it just, like I said, that comes with experience. Seeking knowledge to bring into that decision-making process, and then been able to move faster because you've done some research on your own. You've done all you could do on your part. Now it's a little easier to heed to divine guidance. It's a little easier to hear a random person on the street tell you something about yourself and just be able to recognize, like, yo, he's right. Like, I may not have liked the spirit from which it came from. It may have offended me as a man, you know?
Yeah.
I may have wanted to fight at the time, but I have to acknowledge, like, God spoke to him. He's right. And it's like I said, that takes experience.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of trial and error.
How does that process inform your work?
I had a conversation with an artist named Jamia Edwards, and she told me, like, yo, you have to integrate your spiritual practice with your artistic practice. Like, right now, you have them separate. And if you combine them, you'd be a lot more successful. I didn't know how to do that at the time. I had no idea how to do that. It took probably 2 years of her planting that seed in my head and then me figuring it out to finally make the transition and to be able to walk in what she was telling me. So that goes back to what we was talking about with the experience. Like, sometimes you get an answer or you ask a question, you get the answer, and then you have to get to that space to where you can actually walk in, you know, the answer that you were given. I don't even know how to do this right now.
Yeah.
So there's some work I'm gonna have to do on my part to get there. I had to do all I could do to figure that out. But once I figured it out, now we can move a lot faster.
So I want to sit there for a second, because I think that's important. We're doing things that we don't know how to do, so that we can know how to do them.
Right. Right.
And it's like you have to go before you know.
Yeah.
And the not knowing part oftentimes prevents us from wanting to go.
Right.
Which is where faith comes in. And
resilience.
All of the things that we've been promised as human beings and children of the Most High. And we lose sight of that sometimes because of that unknown.
Right.
And really what I'm feeling you say is, you know, we were talking before about skill and intent. And the piece that we're talking about here is actually intent, from what I can kind of like perceive it to be. It's not just enough to go paint some dope shit.
Right.
It's how do you give that meaning? And I feel what gives it meaning is your relationship to making it, and what's driving you to make it.
Right.
What level of awareness and intentionality you're put into making it. Even if you go in with the deliberate intention of not having intention, even that was deliberate.
Right.
But it's what is your relationship to the process of it? And when you don't understand that piece, I think sometimes for people who make stuff, a lot of what we're doing in the beginning is emulating the things that are around us. So let me go draw what's already been done and all of that, because it's like the idea that we can do something different, like that's a new muscle, right? But that's what I felt when I saw your work and when I saw you talk. I was connected to your intention. And when I went and looked at some of your older pieces, I saw the depth and the growth of your work and what you had done. And like even now, like I couldn't see you talking about the stuff back then at the time, but just looking at the work, I could tell that there's more intention in what it is that you're doing. Do you feel that way when you're making it?
Feel well.
The intentionality deeper?
I think no, not all the time. And that's where you have to know your relationship to self. Why am I doing it? Why am I doing the thing that I'm doing? And then what energy was being expressed through this? So in my work, I can go in it with an intention to express X, Y, and Z, but because I leave room for subconscious expression, sometimes that's not always where we end up. Sometimes we end up in a very different place and we've expressed something very different. And a lot of times that's where the best artwork was created, when we left room for flow. And so to answer your question, I always go into it with an intention. That intention is just usually expressed in a different way than I would have imagined or that I visualized for the piece.
Give me an example of that, if you can.
I painted a portrait of Christ. This was like maybe 2017. I was in college. So this is an old portrait that I had created. And I was painting over it because I was going to paint something new on it. And I was just going over it. And then I started to realize, yo, this is really dope. This looks dope, you know. And it was very abstracted, the face was. So it went from this picture of Jesus to this abstracted portrait of Jesus. And then the meaning was just so much deeper than I could have come up with, you know, on my own as a concept. I just drew so much more meaning from it then than I did when I created it with my own intention all those years ago. So it's leaving room for God to be able to express through you, through that subconscious. And ultimately you come out with much doper work.
So how do you tell that story in that piece? As it relates to intention, how do you tell that story? Because you've got the skill and then you've got the intent,
right? And
you went in with this piece, but you also left room. And the dopest work, you said, is found when you leave room, and you always got to leave room,
right?
So, is it about intent?
Not really. The intent guides what you're doing, but that room for that creative energy to just flow through you like a channel, that's really what you're doing it for. In my opinion, to make some of the best art, that's what you have to allow for, that space. How do I become a channel for something bigger than me to come in and express itself on this canvas or this wall, this mural that I'm creating, or this sculpture that I'm, you know, creating, or this fabric that I'm weaving? How do I leave room for something, a much bigger consciousness to be channeled through me, mentally and physically, and outwardly on this 3D object? How do I bring spirit to the material, physical world? That's ultimately what art is about for me.
All right, so when we talked before about skill and intent,
right?
The intent, because I feel like I'm getting stuck on that word.
Mm-hmm. Well, the intentionality, you have to have something to inform the art, right? So you have to You have to guide it in some way. It's just like when you go into a meditation, you'll be taught to go into it with an intent. You have a question, ask the question to receive the answer in meditation. You want a revelation on something that you read, you go into it meditating on that word, and then you receive the answer. So it's like you have to guide the mind in that way. And so, yes, you always have an intention to guide the mind.
Okay.
But once you guided it, then you have to be smart enough to get out of the way and let it come through.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
How does skill and intent when you go to school, what is school focusing on?
So undergrad is very different. Most professional artists are going to get MFAs, and in an MFA, you usually go to an institution that's either extremely conceptual or extremely skill focused. And neither one of these approaches are good approaches because they're fractions of the whole. So I went to a school that was extremely focused on concept. Very free, very interdisciplinary. And that was great for me at the time because I was an interdisciplinary artist. You know, I was into expressing a lot of different ways, but it was very bad in the fact that I also wanted to be the best draftsman that I could be. I wanted to be able to draw extremely well to be able to express what was coming through my mind, and they weren't giving me that skill. I wasn't being equipped with that skill. And so there are schools that you can go to that focus solely on that. We all about skill. We all about the old master techniques, all about the best drawing techniques, and we're highly focused on that, but they aren't as focused on the conceptual component. These are two polar opposites. With both of these options, nowhere in the picture is business talked about. Is public speaking offered?
Yeah.
It's not in the equation. So you're only dealing with fractions of what should be a holistic education on how to be an artist. And really those are the only options that we have. At least the option that's most used in our society today.
So which side so the conceptual side?
That's the intent.
That's the intent.
Right.
Which is more important?
That's the thing. They're both equally as important. If you have intentionality with no skill to express the intention, then what are we doing? Now you have to resort to a lesser way of creating, and, we get shitty art. We get excuses. People saying, well, oh, this art was about this, this, and that, and the art is some bullshit. But they can hide behind it because society and the culture that we've set as creatives and as gatekeepers of the space, now he can hide behind the fact that I really can't paint. I don't really have the skill set that I need to be able to express the ideas that I would like to express with a spirit of excellence. So I just do it, the best I can, and people will buy it because they're shallow and, it's about a market and an investment.
And if you're a good storyteller,
you can really capitalize on being a good storyteller and not having any creative talent, not having any creative skill, just being a good storyteller. So you get a fraction of what we're supposed to be. And I think that's a big issue with the art world now. We have people who never trained under a muralist creating murals. We have people who never got, or people who never took drawing classes who are drawing portraits. And then you have abstract artists who are trying to create abstract art, but they don't value the skill of drawing. It's important no matter what, form of art you choose to create. And so you're just dealing with artists who were not fully developed and don't even have the space to fully develop because now they have to go make money. Now they're in the real world. It's too late now.
Yeah.
You're 29 years old now. You want to go get an art class?
Yeah.
You got a family to feed.
You got
man.
2 kids.
You know what I'm saying? You got debt now because you went to a school that couldn't support your artistic growth the way they should have been able to. Mm-hmm. And you still haven't learned the skills that you need. So you're a dope artist, but you can't articulate anything because they didn't focus on that. Or, you could draw extremely well, but you don't know how to storytell. It's equally as bad. And so you're dealing with a lot of people who aren't eating, who aren't making money because they're very good in the area of storytelling, but they're missing all the other components. They're very good at drawing, but they're missing the other. So again, we have fractions of artists.
Do you think knowing specific historical figures within art is important to your artistry? Does that inform the work is it helpful for your current work to be informed and understand what some of the older folks were doing?
It's extremely important to know what artists before you were doing and how they were making and how they were thinking. But it should not dictate your making and your thinking and your creating. And that's the problem. A lot of people just copying processes. And nobody is free thinking. Nobody is, I won't say nobody, but many artists are not thinking, they're not creating with a free spirit. They're thinking about a market. It's just a lot of issues with that. So ultimately, history is always important. You need to know what happened before you to know where you're going, obviously, but you have to be taught how to be an artist. And that's something that it's an issue for the art world.
Now, when you were talking about conceptual versus skill, and you can have a lot of concepts and ideas, but you might not necessarily have the skill set to bring them forth.
Right.
Is that what led you to work with more materials?
No, ultimately I worked on my skill, but I had to do it individually, and that was the thing. So you just have to be disciplined and work on those things. The materiality comes into play when I focus so much on skill that me personally, I'm realizing that, I need to focus more on my intentionality and more on the conceptual side of what I'm doing, bringing more meaning into the work. So the materiality for me, I'm able to express a lot within it symbolically that I can't just with, a paintbrush and a canvas. It's much more expressive to use materials to be able to communicate certain things. So for me, I use material that way.
So, and you also use your fingers.
Yeah, everything. Fingers, palette knives, brushes, glass. There's nothing that I count out of the process.
So I guess you make these big, I don't know what the hell they're called, dude. Circles, spheres, and they're beautiful. I'm gonna put some up.
Yeah.
And some are made out of different types of crystals. Is that new for your work?
I would say relatively new.
Okay.
Been doing it for like the past 2 years, playing around with it for probably the past 3.
What drove you to want to start working with crystals and creating those pieces?
The symbology in them. Crystals are oftentimes used for healing in certain communities, so emotional healing, spiritual healing. But what I noticed with the crystals is they all mean something symbolically, and they all carry a certain energy within them. And so for me as an artist, I'm looking at it as a way to be able to express something that's spiritual or mental in my work. And so for that reason, I look at it as a great tool and the ability to be able to create talismans with those objects. Yeah, and have the art actually be a meditative tool if you know what you're doing.
You use the word understand a lot in the conversation. So I want to try to understand what understanding means to you. Because this word has come up a lot in a lot of my previous conversations with other folks. And it's something that I've devoted a lot of energy into, as well as the acquisition of knowledge, which helps inform your understanding of things.
Right.
So what I want to know from you is, how far do you think understanding can get you as an artist? And what do you do when you reach that point?
I think ultimately it depends on it's like I said, it's most important that you allow that creative energy to flow. And you don't have to really have a lot of understanding about the history, about, the correct terminology used to express what you're doing, about how to express yourself publicly or verbally in order to do that. Some people just flow. They're just creative, and it just comes out when they hit that canvas, or they're making that sculpture or that pottery. They can't put 2 good sentences together, but they can create. They dominate in that space. And so I think it's only important when we're talking about a market and being able to promote yourself, to sell yourself as an artist, because ultimately you do have to eat. And you do have to present your art to the world. And in the society that we live in today, the public speaking component and the intentionality behind what you're doing is very important to a lot of folk.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, I would say it's important for your success, but it's not necessarily important to create some dope work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not as important,
Because I think because the shadow work and the artwork are synonymous for you. You integrated them both.
Right.
And I think as you're talking and what I learned about what's resonating with me and what you're saying is the idea of the understanding and the acquisition of knowledge to inform. And what I've found in my experience is that I'll use, and I even still do this now, by the way, and I'm thinking about something very specific. I just had a conversation with somebody 2 days ago, and they were like, get out your motherfucking head. Stop bullshitting. And because they're patterns, right? To a large degree. Like the work is never done.
Never.
But to go out and get more knowledge and do more research to learn about some certain things is really a tactic I use to not go when I know I needed to go. As when I was younger.
Yeah.
And so I knew what I needed to do. God spoke. He said, go left.
Right.
So, let me go do some more research just to make sure. And then 80% of the information will say go left, 10% will say go right, and the other 10% will say stay still. But I need more people. I need more people because I really don't want to go left. More confirmation. Through the process of doing that, I'm in the way.
Yeah.
The answer's already been told.
Right.
I'm either not trusting myself or I'm hiding behind this acquisition of knowledge to be like, oh, I need a little bit more data. There's something I'm working on right now that I need to just do.
Stuck in limbo.
But I want to try to go get more research when I need to just go do it. So with the piece of all the work being integrated and the understanding element of it is just getting better at like just trusting what you know you're supposed to do. Because there are certain times when I've hit not being able to understand when I've been told by God to move. And I've used not understanding to not move because I need to understand or I need to do some more research. Not saying this is you. I'm just saying I'm just sharing what kind of like my process has been like for similar, sorts of things. And what I'm getting better at, I'm not perfect, is just when I'm told, just fucking do it. Just go. And not see the result as bad or good necessarily, but just as an opportunity to glean more about what you need to glean more about, or just even sometimes just getting in a habit of doing it.
Yeah.
Because I like the integration. And that's a lot, some people come here and think it's just a podcast. I'm integrating a lot of things to try to make sense, understand. And then I'm also trying to just get in the practice of just integrating things so that when I can shorten that time, you know what I'm saying? So I'm mumbling, but that was just my thoughts about the piece. What's next for your work?
I would say ultimately just staying on the path that I'm on now. I feel like I'm just getting to a point where I've successfully integrated my spiritual path with my artistic path. And so it's just focusing on that from here on out and, pumping out a lot of work, continuing to inform my practice with research, study, meditation in that regard. But just working, man. Working.
You got married last year.
Yeah.
You an artist, full-time artist.
I'm an educator as well.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, so okay. The make money piece is real.
Yeah.
And that I do makes it even realer.
Yeah.
How you managing that pressure?
I would say it's not that much pressure.
Okay.
As an educator, I have a steady check coming in. So that part of it is eliminated. The stress that I have is like, I know that I'm capable of being at a certain place and I'm not there. How do I get there as fast as possible? It's always going in the back of my mind. So that's the pressure I feel.
Not paycheck pressure.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's a different pressure. It's still, it's just as annoying.
Yeah.
It's something that you have to deal with. But ultimately, I'm not at a place where I'm hurting for cash and now I have to create something just to get by. So it's just balance. She wants your time. obviously I'm busy doing a lot of things. I'm educating. I come home, I'm tired. I still have to create. Still got to work out. Still got to do my research. Still got to meditate. You know, still got to, you know, figure out ways to get over the loopholes and obstacles that society has set for me, you know, by way of shitty food and, you know, bad economic, you know, practices and things of that nature that are being, you know, influencing my environment. So just really taking control of my environment and, you know, being the 13, they say Christ sits outside of the circle of time and space, really internalizing that, you know, being able to be in a situation but not allow the job, the pressure of making it in, you know, art, the pressure of doing this as a husband, not allowing all of those things and voices to affect my now.
Yeah.
And how I'm thinking and how I'm moving. You know, being able to find that inner peace and move with wisdom in that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a constant journey.
That's a challenge, man.
It is.
The beautiful part
It
for
is.
people who create is that is an outlet, you know, for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's therapeutic, you know, especially if you've got the relationship that you have where it's integrated. You know, some people see it as work. Somebody else could see it as work, but like for people like us or whatever, it's like, oh, this is where you go in to do a different kind of work, to like deal with the pressures of life and just what it means to live as a black man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, where it becomes hard is when you let all those voices come into play. I gotta make it by this year. If I don't do this, I'm not successful. If I don't, you know, all of that, that's harmful and it can affect your practice in a very negative way. It can make you not want to create because you feel like nothing that you're creating is popping the way it should. It's not coming out the way I need it to for me to be in this show or this gallery. Like, all of that you have to cancel out as noise and just, like I said, focus on the now. What am I doing right now? Right now, we focusing on expressing this through this artwork. That's all we gonna focus on and go into that space. And it's a process, you know. It's not easy, like you said. It's a journey as far as mastering that space and being able to cancel out all of the noise, but getting much better at it.
Dude, you made two pieces that are my favorite.
Yeah.
Based on what I've seen. And I got to ask you about them.
Okay.
First one, the one who walks his path. You remember this one?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that joint.
Yeah. So the piece, if you look at it, he looks like he's kind of looking off into, you know, deep thought or meditation. And it's ultimately about navigating that space in your head, that space in your physical reality of doing those things that are necessary for you to be who you were called to be, for you to walk in the purpose that you meant to be walking in, and dealing with the obstacles that come with that path. And, you know, how do you overcome that? How do you come out on the other side a diamond? So those are all the thoughts that went into making that. And then how can I express that with the paint, the color, the material? And so I use a lot of vibrant paint in that piece. I use glass, things of that nature. So
He looks, I don't know if defeated is the right word, but he definitely looks like he done been through some shit.
Yeah. And I wanted that to come through because that's real. You know, we a lot of time we show the pretty side, but the fact of the matter is, man, it's not no easy thing to do. To commit to your path and to be able to walk it and constantly eliminate those things that are hindering your speed and walking in that path. And it's a tough process, but ultimately It has some colorful fruit.
Yeah. Are you you more at peace with yourself now that you've been walking in your path?
Yeah. Yeah. I still often, you always gonna have questions about things, especially as an artist. That's just the way our minds go as creatives. So that's something that I'm learning to navigate. But being able to ask those constructive questions that I know are going to bring a lot of wisdom in once I get on the other side of the answer, and then dwelling in the space between the answer with more optimism, more joy. And that's something that I had to learn, That's something that can destroy a person. You asking a question that you don't know the answer to, you don't know where the answer is going to come, or if there's an answer for it. You may fear the answer, but you ask it anyway. You're brave enough to ask it anyway, and then trust God for the answer. You know there's an answer. But in that space, you have to feed your mind in a way that allows you to still operate your day-to-day successfully and with a certain amount of joy and a certain amount of optimism, and not living in a anxious, worrisome mind. And that's something I had to learn.
It's like being in the
learn.
It's like being in the boat,
right,
in the storm, and everybody wilding, and Jesus is there, calm.
Yeah,
it's just like you just gotta like that faith. That faith thing is huge, and I think I feel like the best way for us to demonstrate our faith and trust is to walk that path. It's almost like I was having a conversation with my brother the other day, and I was like, Jesus still went to the supper, bro. He still went.
Yeah.
He knew what was gonna happen.
He didn't show it on his face.
But he had to go.
He had to go.
And we all have that version of that level of faith to our path that we've got to move with and take. And
we
trust.
all have our cross to bear, just like he did.
It's just, and we're not bearing it.
Yeah.
We're not. And I think that for a lot of people, myself included, that's where a lot of the anxiety comes in, is because like we lack that. We lack that. We talk about faith, right? We talk about forgiveness. We talk about love. We talk about all of this stuff, this high level shit, right? But it's like when you really put that into practice, that's some different shit.
It is.
It's different.
And not only is it different, most people not willing to do that.
Yeah.
They're not willing to do that,
Yeah.
They'll go to church, they'll go to mosque or whatever, they go to, they'll read, maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe, because 80% of people not doing that. And even when they're not reading with the true translations, they're not taking heed to the information. But to really know what you came to do and really walk that path and bear that cross and the things that come with that puts you in a whole nother lane. Completely different lane from other folk.
And when you got black people, black men doing it.
Yeah.
For real. That's a beautiful thing to demonstrate to other black people, bro.
Yeah.
And for somebody like you who had options, sports and some other things, like you picking this path, that's a blessing for another person to sit and witness, man. And like our lives, like is similar to the work isn't ours either. To a large, we're here to be of service to something bigger and greater than ourselves.
Right.
Now the question is, what is your relationship to that process? Because even if you, like you said, the space between, that's the answer.
Yeah.
When you really think about
it. It is. And I'm just now getting there.
Yeah.
The character part. That comes into play. That's the most important thing. The whole idea or goal, you should say, one of the biggest goals is to have that character in those moments and to be able to bear the fruit of that. Even in the midst of trial, in the midst of everything going crazy, in the midst of not seeing what you were promised, having to hold that integrity and that character in that space. Once you can master that, that's what it's really about. Yeah. That's when you move on a different type time.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked about that piece, bro. Because that was one of the ones. I got another one. You think you know what it is? You got a gang of pieces, bro. So you like
right. I'm looking. I don't know.
Colorful soul hidden in chaos.
That's actually the piece I was talking about.
Which one? With the Jesus?
Mm-hmm. That's the one. That was a whole different piece. Whole different piece. So like I said, I took the piece. Originally, I was going to paint over it, and I had a whole concept for the piece that I was going to create. And I was just in my dorm room, bunch of guys in my dorm room, we chilling, hanging out. And they like, yo, that shit hard. So I'm like, yeah, this is. So I kept doing it, and I'm working on it. And I'm realizing, like, this is the piece. And so, like I said, you have to leave that room for higher consciousness to be able to channel through you, that creative expression to flow through you. And I did with that piece, and that's what happened.
It's beautiful, dude.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's what I call art, like in the genuine sense of the word. It moves. Like if you can make something that moves someone, and there was something about both of those pieces that I just felt moved by, and I know that it's something in me that I see in those pieces. And then you go and you look at the name, and then you see what they called it, and you're like, oh wow, and then that adds another layer of meaning and relevancy to it. And sometimes I just feel like a colorful soul, bro, hidden in chaos, like in myself. And
How so? I'm curious.
I'm still trying to resolve the contradictions of myself and really embrace all the parts of who I am. And that's difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I find that I'm having difficulty. I know that once I unlock that for myself, I'm going to be able to do that for other people. I'm a very judgmental person just in general, bro. And that's because I'm judgmental towards myself. And there's like this little boy or like this beautiful being that's covered under a whole bunch of bullshit. And I'm spending so much time judging the bullshit that it's hard for me sometimes to see what's underneath it. And I've tried to judge the bullshit. I've tried to clean it up.
Right.
I've tried to act like it doesn't exist. And I know through the answer that that's also a part of who I am. And that maybe if I pull back, I can see it all as a beautiful soul. And so I'm in a constant state of this micro and macro type of thing. Looking at the little boy and looking at the shit. Looking at the little boy, looking at the shit. Looking at the little boy, and
that's the work.
And I wanna be okay with the dance, with the flow of that.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
It does, and that's shadow work, bro.
Yeah.
You describing it to a T. The whole intent behind the piece, or at least what was expressed in the piece, you describing it to a T. That's what it was about. And ultimately what you describing, the process in which you looking at this micro level and then looking at this macro, that's exactly what I do, bro. That's exact. So that we're all doing it. It's just we aren't talking about it. Hence the word shadow work.
It's in the shadow. Yeah.
Everybody's doing it or
Yeah.
not. Those people, they just not seeing the growth.
Yeah.
But the people who are seeing the growth, no, they're doing the work. They're just not openly talking about it with you. And so the people who are willing to vulnerably talk about those things, you're helping so many other people get through those spaces in their mind, because so many people dealing with this, bro.
Yeah. Yeah,
This is what we're here for. So if we can put words to something that's going on in their mind and make it real for them, people to realize that they're not crazy, that the conversations and the visualizations and interactions that they're having with themselves are beneficial. If you're going through this process to come out on the other side whole, that's the work, bro.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do as creatives and as people with a platform, is to shed a light on that.
I love that piece, dude. And knowing that it started with Jesus makes it even colder.
Yeah.
Makes it even colder.
Yeah.
Because it makes me, but that's a part of that storytelling and that tent. Like Jesus is in all of us, even if you can't see it.
And that's the beauty in it. Like, we are here because of God. Obviously, something higher had to create you, but we walk around and we forget that. I'm guilty. Well, I won't say I'm guilty of that. I would say that I'm guilty in acknowledging it in the way that I should be acknowledging it, and then drawing others to that same conclusion, But ultimately, that is a lot of people's story, a colorful soul. That's a lot of people's story. They got God in them, They have a beautiful persona, a beautiful soul, only if they will allow it to come out and play, to come out and be heard, to come out and be expressed. But a lot of times people allow their environment to dictate. People allow, their parents or their brother or their sister or their cousins or the auntie or the person at the job or the person who lived down the street that's always judging you. We allow all of those outside voices to come in and dictate space for your soul, to dictate how God is able to express himself through you. So that's what we have to work on.